make it fun. Make your writing process fun, because so much of how you get a kid engaged with stories is through playfulness.
That was special author guest Dori Graham sharing her advice for beginning authors. Stay tuned to hear more about Dori's journey as an author here on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We'll be back after the intro. Welcome to Pages and Voices, the local author podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community. Today's author guest is children's author Dori Graham. Dori lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana with her phenomenal wife, ornery dog, and diva cat. Working every day as a school librarian, teacher, and writer, Dori gets to be all three things that her 8-year-old self wanted to be when she grew up. She wholeheartedly believes in the power of books, the ability to turn fears into opportunities, and the existence of dragons. Dori, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I know that's what everybody says, but I'm an excitable person, so.
That's all right. And I just found out this is your first podcast.
It is.
That's yes, this is thrilling. We're gonna have fun together. So we used to work together at ACPL. I have always found your energy and joy to be contagious and wish there were more people in the world like you. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. So I'm going to have you share a reading from your book, but first let's tell the listeners about it. When little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, a spider scared her away, or so the story goes. But not this Miss Muffet. Not only does she find the spider interesting, she isn't afraid of a series of other so-called frightening animals. Can the story's narrator find anything to scare this brave Miss Muffet away? I'm going to let you share now.
All right. So this story is told by a narrator, and Miss Muffet, I always think of him as a male narrator. So I use this voice when I'm the narrator. And I'll use this voice when I'm Miss Muffet. This, my dear reader, is the story of little Miss Muffet. Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. These curds are delicious. Along came a spider. A what? It sat down beside her. It sat where? And frightened Miss Muffet away. Boo! Wait, what's going on here? Miss Muffet, aren't you afraid? No way! I like spiders. Look at all those long, lanky legs. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, this won't work. I can't tell the story if you aren't afraid of spiders. How about this? Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a tiger! It sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Ooh, a kitty! No. He's a tiger. He's supposed to be scary. But he's so sweet and fluffy. Here, kitty. Scat cat. I'm going to try again. Now, little Miss Muffet is going to continue to meet different animals that the narrator's going to try and scare her with. The thing is, Miss Muffet just isn't scared. And if you want to know how the story ends, you'll have to read the book.
Thank you for sharing. I love this book. I needed this book when I was a kid. It's so good. I love that she's not scared of anything. That's wonderful. And I do want to mention that this book has earned the School Library Journal Star Review in the Indiana Authors Award shortlist in children's books category. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Can you tell us, is Miss Muffet based on anyone we know? I mean, it's obviously a delightful retelling of a classic story, but who is your Miss Muffet based on?
So earlier I said that I was excitable, and that is very true. However, I was not incredibly brave. I don't know that I was really scared of animals per se, but I had a lot of fears, but also some reasons to be afraid. So I think Miss Muffet is what I wish I could have been in some ways. And then also I always see her as having a touch of like me when I used to pretend to be the crocodile hunter, Steve Irwin. I don't know if you guys remember that show. But his daughter, Bindi Irwin, is like super, super into animal conservation.
Yes,
And like
yes.
I follow her on Instagram. And the way that she and her husband and her daughter love animals reminds me of Miss Muffet. So there was a little influence there.
Okay. The pictures put me in mind of you a little bit, of the character. I don't know. She just seemed full of life, so it made me think of you. So we are surely going to talk more about Miss Muffet, but let's back up. Were you an avid reader as a child?
I was. I always say I craved stories. So when it came to free time, my mom, it was really important to her that we not spend a lot of time watching TV. So we were limited to 1 hour a day and then one movie a week, and it had to be Friday or Saturday. So all of that to say that we filled our time a lot by just being crazy kids running around the neighborhood. I come from a family of 10 kids, so we always had someone to play with.
Yeah.
But we read a lot, and we were read to a lot. But then when it became time for me to learn to read, I actually have dyslexia and dyscalculia. I can barely say that word, even still. And so it was frustrating. It was halting for me. I did a lot of audiobooks, and I still do a lot of audiobooks. But ultimately, I had some really excellent motivation and teachers. And so I was able to get to the point where I could read to myself. And once I got to that point, I just never stopped.
Never looked back.
Yeah. And I always say there were multiple levels, and it was figurative and literal, but books and librarians saved my life multiple times as a kid. So I love books. I love them.
Yeah. So I have a question based on something you just said. Oh, dyscalculia. Is that what can you tell us more about that?
So dyscalculia, I'm not actually certain if it's ia or
Sure.
It's IA at the end. It is when you have a similar reaction to numbers as you do letters. So when for instance, I am a librarian, and anytime I have to get a nonfiction book, bless my heart, I cannot keep the numbers in order unless I chant them, either in my head or out loud. And then oftentimes the kid that you're working with is walking with you, so then you can't necessarily chant them in your head. So I'd always make it a game between me and the kid, and I'd be like, I'll remember these numbers, you remember these numbers.
That's a great way to handle it.
And then, so hopefully it was never very obvious to others, but
that's a really great way to handle it. And so, one more question based on something you said. You said 1 hour a day you got to watch TV.
Yeah.
What did you watch? What did you always pick?
We watched a lot of the Waltons because it was relatable to us. And then we watched Young Writers, which was
yes,
you know Young Writers.
Yes,
I love that you
my
know that
sister
show.
loved that show, and so of course we watched that show.
Yes,
it was kind of like
Pony Express.
it was like a Young Guns, but for TV.
Exactly, exactly.
Was Stephen Baldwin in that? Yep.
Yeah, he was Cody. I think,
I think you're right. Yeah, we watch that show all the time. But we watch the Waltons too. I get real nostalgic when I hear that musical intro into the Waltons.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of my mom. Oh, yeah. And so there's that connection. Yes. But anyways, I get super nostalgic. So anyways. Okay, I was just curious.
There's something special about having limit to your TV because what you do watch is like so precious. Like, you know what you're saying about the Waltons, or I can hear the Young Writers or Get Smart, those songs in my head, and it's
the Waltons and MASH do it for me still to this day. Yeah. So what was your favorite childhood book?
So my favorite picture book was Where the Wild Things Are. I am a really emotional adult, and I was a very emotional child.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah, we're same.
Yeah. And I was one of the middle kids. I'm number 6 of 10. And so Where the Wild Things Are was always really captivating to me because the idea of Max getting sent to his room is like me all day as a kid. And so I could relate to that, but also the idea that when you got there, you still had all of these angsty, intense feelings.
Yes.
And what do you do with them? And so he was showing me, here's what you can do with them, and then be ready to come back to you're home and maybe dinner will be waiting for you and it will still be warm, and being the end of it, having this like ethic of care in it, that was really a part of how my mom parented, specifically my mom. So I really love that one because, behind your back as a kid, it's teaching you self-regulation.
Yes, absolutely. I know. Yeah, I wish I had that book when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That would have been fantastic. Yeah. It took me years to realize, your emotions are separate from you.
Yes.
You feel them. They aren't all you.
Yeah.
They're just part of you. So
they inform you.
It would have been great to know that as a kiddo.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that's so special about that book, if you've never read it or even if you have read it, the next time you do, pay attention to the spacing of the illustrations, because Maurice Sendak is masterful in that book. It's the reason it won the Caldecott the year it came out, in that his story starts with a very small portion of the page being illustrated. And as Max's emotions grow, so does the scale of the page until it's a full spread for 4 pages, 4 spreads that are all just image of the wild rumpus. And then it slowly decreases as the book ends until the last page is just the words "still warm." And it's just a masterpiece.
I'm going to go back and read this book now.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
It's a cool journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have another one?
I do.
Okay, I thought so.
So that was my favorite picture book, but I kind of have a tie for favorite middle grade books that were really informative to me as an elementary school kid. And it was The Midwife's Apprentice by Karen Cushman. Okay. And A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And A Wrinkle in Time is really, more famous than The Midwife's Apprentice, but both were Newbery Award winners. And Midwife's Apprentice has a character who, her name is Brat, and that's all she remembers being called. She was homeless, and then she gets found. She's trying to stay warm in a dung pile, and so then the woman who finds her, who's a midwife, calls her Beetle, like a dung beetle, and Beetle starts to work as the apprentice to this midwife, who's really gruff around the edges, and eventually Brat/Beetle chooses a name for herself. She chooses to go by Alice, and she starts to take agency and has to deliver a baby on her own because the midwife had to go and take care of the lady of their village. And so she, helps this mother birth her baby, and then the midwife, Jane, feels territorial. And then they have a falling out, and Alice goes off into the world, and then eventually she comes back and kind of demands in her own soft way to be trained further. And the journey that she goes on it was one of the first books that I read that had grit or edge to the story while still so very much having been written with care. And so in the moments where you're like, oh my goodness, this is more than Alice should be able to bear, Karen Cushman does a great job of bringing something into the story in that moment to help give relief to the pain or to the neglect. And it just, I think I recognized it as a flashlight in the dark when my own story gets that way. Right. And
this was a YA? This was a...
No, it's middle grade. It's written for 12 and under.
Oh, gosh.
So 8 to 12-year-old, I think, is what it would have been geared towards. And that's one of the things, actually, that I love about children's literature is that when you talk about some of the elements in a children's book, neglect, loss, grief, pain, war, those are really heavy topics and topics that I think some people want to shield kids away from.
Gloss over.
Yeah, but ultimately, my hope would be that children don't experience those things young. But as someone who did, you need to be able to see yourself.
Yes, you do.
In characters.
Reflected there on the page.
Yeah, so they...
Sure.
In children's literature, they talk a lot about mirrors and windows. You need a mirror growing up. showing yourself. And you also need windows into things that you've not experienced. And so books like The Midwife's Apprentice, the reason it wins a Newbery is because it has the universal themes that I think you're lying to a kid if you don't let them see that. Yeah. And the great thing about books is that they're practice. They teach you grit without you having to necessarily go through it.
Actually deal with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Or they give you grit to deal with the stuff that you're going through. And so the wonderful thing about children's literature is that authors are very rarely approaching it with anything but a deep care, an ethic of care. And there's so many craft elements. Actually, my critical thesis for grad school was about this, an ethic of care in children's writing and how different craft elements can create that careful but authentic story.
Yes. I feel like we could talk about this.
Right?
We could have a whole other episode just about that, for sure. So when did you get the writing bug yourself?
So I went to elementary school here in Fort Wayne at Weiser Park Whitney Young Elementary. And Whitney Young is now a preschool, but at the time it was where you went for first and second grade. And when I was there in first grade, we had something called the Koala Kid Press.
I love it.
Yeah, it was so sweet. Moms used to and dads used to donate their time to bind books for us using contact paper and construction paper for the covers and stuff. So
that started it.
Yeah.
Do you remember the book that you created?
Yes. It was called A Leaf in Space. But one of the things that they did on purpose was they didn't edit our mistakes or misspellings or anything because they just wanted to encourage us to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's actually called The Lef in Spas.
It sounds French.
Yes, exactly. It's very fancy.
Yes, you got yourself a fancy kid's book there. I love it. Do you still have it?
I do.
Yay,
it's at my mom's house.
Oh, that's great. And so who in your life nurtured that seed then as you moved on from Whitney Young?
Well, I think that pretty much every teacher that I had at Weiser Park and Whitney Young did. It was a fine arts school, and so creation was a huge part of our curriculum. It was the basis of all of our curriculum. And so, I want to give a shout out to Robin Baster, my first grade teacher.
Aww.
Shanita Nelson, my second grade teacher. She had us do a young author program where every kid wrote a book and it got submitted, and then it was chosen for one kid to represent each grade in your school, and I was the second grade representative.
Fantastic.
A book called Best Friends. I could go on, but the person that I really want to give a shout out to would be Carol Bandor. She was the librarian at Weiser Park, and she was the original inspiration for me to ever want to become or try to become a librarian. I said this about books earlier, but I think Miss Bandor, I got to work with her as a senior in high school, too. I got to go back and shadow her for a whole semester. And there are so many moments in life where I know that if I had not had her gentleness, even though she was so sassy, and her care of me and giving me books to read and a special nook under her desk to read in and a safe space, hugely big safe space. If I hadn't had that when I was younger, going through some of the secretive things that I was going through, I don't think I would have made it through middle school and high school. And she just helped protect my heart. I really credit her with that. And she was always trying to get me to write as well as read. So.
Yeah, I have some of those people in my life, too.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Really.
I don't ever know if they completely understand their role and exactly what they did for me, or you,
Yeah.
or anybody that gets that kind of help, that level of care from an adult that's not in their family.
Right.
So I
And
don't.
even if you try and communicate it to them, I don't know that it always sinks in. So
I
I've
know.
just gotten to a point where I'm like, well, I'll try and pay it forward.
I know, absolutely. Yes, I feel the same way. So, when did you begin seriously thinking, I want to bring the story of Miss Muffet to life?
So Miss Muffet is actually originally a puppet show, and one that I actually brought to the ACPL preschool puppet show. So we were, at the time I was in my graduate program, which I got from Hamlin University, and it's a master's in creative writing for children and young adults. And so I was in the midst of that, and as I was, writing picture books and plays and puppet shows and YA novels and all kinds of stuff, I got to be part of the puppet show here, and they were like, well, why don't you give us one of yours and we'll perform it? And so I got to perform it.
Great.
Yeah, and then from there, I thought to myself, that could be a picture book.
Yeah.
And mulled over it for a few weeks, just occasionally in the back of my head, and then sat down and converted it.
And did it.
Yeah.
Okay. So say again where you got your Master of Fine Arts?
Hamlin University. It's in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Okay.
But it is a low residency program, so you're just there for about 10 days twice a year. And then during the semesters between those visits in January and in July, you get paired with a writer. And because these writers don't have to live in Minnesota, you get paired with writers like Jean Yang and Emily Jenkins. And
how exciting.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. And so
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you begin? Like, I know you said it was puppets.
Yeah.
But I mean, was it easy to translate it to the page?
So the crazy thing about Brave Miss Muffet is, like, so often even though it's a picture book, which seems simple, but it's not easy. Easy and simple being two different things. A well-constructed picture book is not easy normally. Right. And I hate to be able to say this because I don't want to give people false hope, but this one was easy. It was one.
Sometimes it just comes out. It does.
It's the only time it's actually come out easily and had the life that this book has had. And it was something that I was like, what if Miss Muffet wasn't afraid? And started with that question, and I went with the rule of threes, gave her 3 things to not be afraid of, and then 3 things to rapidly not be afraid of, and then one big thing to try and be the boss at the end of the level kind of thing. And it just came out really fast and easy. I think I spent maybe 45 minutes writing the the puppet show. And then when I decided to convert it, it took about an hour and a half to kind of word it in a way that I felt like would be good for the 32 pages. So.
Well, good for you. That's great when that happens.
I know.
Love that.
I don't expect it again.
Love that.
Hear me, Muse? I don't expect it. So if you want to give that to me,
right? Please,
that'd be lovely.
Please. So, was there a reason you picked the particular animals you picked? Spider, tiger, crocodile, snakes, bears, sharks, and dragons.
So originally those were maybe some other animals, but the ones that it ended up being were the ones that we had the coolest puppets for. So it was
very practical.
Yes, exactly. And then the snakes, bears, sharks portion wasn't at all part of the original puppet show. And those ones I added just because I liked the sounds of the words, to be honest. And also, obviously, snakes and sharks in particular are very often a person's phobia. Yes. And that was kind of what I was trying to do, was unpack some phobias, because the spider being kind of the origin of it. My aunt was petrified of spiders growing up. And because she was always so scared of spiders, you see this woman who is in charge of you and like, you know, so protective and careful and et cetera. And then suddenly she's
Very capable.
freaking out. And you're like, I'm scared of those too because it makes her scared. And like, I remember the moment where like we were learning about arachnids and, am I saying that word right?
Arachnids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe. I think that's how you say it.
Arachnids.
Arachnids.
We were studying them in like third grade or something. And I was like, I don't think I'm actually scared of these. So like having that memory kind of helped inform the story a bit. And then like snakes, bears, sharks, like just tasted good. I don't know. The words were good.
Yeah, right. They came out well, right? I love it. I love it. So were there any resources you found valuable while writing the book? Or I guess maybe when you initially wrote the puppet show?
So Phyllis Root, who is a picture book writer who lives in Minnesota, but for a portion of her childhood lived here in Fort Wayne.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Phyllis Root
Great connection.
Was my advisor for my first semester at Hamlin, and she is a wealth of knowledge. I was working in children's services here at Allen County Public Library at the time, so I was around books a lot and doing story times and just saturated in books. And Phyllis had that intense knowledge base even without those resources. And so between the books at ACPL and Phyllis's guidance, I just feel like I had learned it enough that when it came time to do it, that's how it came out so easily. It was not because it was this innate talent. It was that I'd had, you know, at that point, a year's worth of very concentrated practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was there any part of the process that you didn't care for? Not necessarily, you know, the whole thing, writing the book, finding somebody to publish it. Was there any part of that process that you found daunting?
Yes. The only thing that really was a hassle was waiting from the time that you get it submitted and accepted to the time that it is a book in your hand. It took about nearly a year and a half. And that is excruciating because at first you're not even allowed to tell people about it.
Yes.
So you're just like, I have this great news and I have no reason to share it without breaking contract. So you just like tell the person closest to you and then just like, you know,
pretend
hold
like it's
your breath.
not there. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I would find that very difficult as well. I mean, I would want to write it across the sky.
Yeah,
you know?
right. It was very painful. I'm very proud that I didn't break contracts.
Yes. Good job, Dori.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, what's the one thing you want young readers to take away from Brave Miss Muffet?
I think, you know, obviously when you're writing a story, you're either writing to entertain, to teach, or to question, and or all three. In this case, it was not as important to me that kids learn bravery, which is interesting because I don't know that Miss Muffet is actually that brave. She's maybe even foolhardy. Like, don't go and put your head in a crocodile's mouth.
Yeah, right.
But I think that for me, it was questioning the common narrative because here's this narrator telling her how to be, and she's not
choosing her voice,
and she's not doing it in like a like defiant way, which is something that when someone tries to tell me what I am, there's a rebellious part of me that like rises up. And in her case, it was just like, nope, because this is what I am, and I'm good with it. And so I think I love the fact that though the character or the narrator speaks with such confidence, she does too. And so that's the writing behind the child's back in a way. It ultimately is considered subversive because what we call subversive literature is when there are rules that are being broken. So in this case, the narrator is directly speaking to the audience, and then the main character is directly speaking to the narrator, which is an abnormality. So we've broken the rule, and then the book itself is about kind of breaking a rule. This is the story he's telling, and this is the story she is living, and they're not the same story. And so, just question the common narrative. Maybe it's your story too. Maybe it's not.
Right, right. I like that. Yeah, I definitely love that she was using her voice. As a child, I'd never used my voice. It caused me a great deal of anxiety to actually say what I was thinking and feeling. So then that just translated to Megan crying a lot.
Yeah.
So as an adult, I'm always really drawn to women who use their voice and advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's something that I feel like I'm still learning at 45 years old. That's never been, like, some women are so great at it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm still learning how to do that.
Yeah.
So I loved that part of the book.
Yay.
So talk to me about Raycraft books. Okay. So how did you connect with them?
So Raycraft is actually a small imprint of Benchmark Press.
Okay.
Benchmark is a press that prints specifically for libraries and schools originally. And so normally they do write for hires, which means that you write the thing maybe at their bequest, but then you sell it to them for a flat rate and they own it. And that's how a lot of writers like supplement their income. Mm-hmm. And then there's trade, which means that you retain some rights and you get a royalty once your advance has paid out. And, it's the standard thing that we would think of when it comes to creation and publications. So Raycraft was their first attempt at trade, and it was specifically for marginalized voices. I'm biracial, and I'm also LGBTQIA, so I qualified in multiple ways. And then, I guess also I'm dyslexic, so. But the connection for Raycraft actually came through one of my advisors from Hamlin, Emily Jenkins, who writes as Emily Jenkins for picture books and writes as E. Lockhart for YA. She's well known for We Were Liars, is her most popular book. Emily has a friend who was working for Raycraft, and she passed my name on to Sunita Apti, and Sunita reached out. I gave them a couple of my books. They were really interested in Brave Miss Muffet. And at the time, I actually was advised to hold off because they were still pretty fledgling. And so that was in 2018. And then in 2021 is when I resubmitted it. And
Here we are.
It increased the value by holding on to it a little bit.
Okay. So did they provide the illustrator Kyle Beckett?
Yeah, most people don't realize this about children's literature, but the illustrator and the writer are rarely connected.
Okay.
This is controversial, what I'm about to say. But in my opinion, as a librarian at least, the best picture books are either a picture book duo, an illustrator and a writer who are working together, and
Working in tandem, yeah.
most agents and publishers won't say yes to a partnership unless they are connected. And usually it's spouses or a mother-daughter team or siblings, because that bond, they take the stress, and then what they give to the the duo stresses things out, and then what they give to the publisher through their agent is the polished effect. Whereas when it comes to like a writer like me and an illustrator like Kyle, I submit my work. I can maybe leave author's notes when it comes to illustration if it's like very imperative that like she wears orange galoshes because of something later in the story. That's the only time you'd really leave an author or like a narrator note. Otherwise, my story, once it's given, that's where my story ends unless they ask for something.
Okay.
And Kyle's story begins once he's given my script.
Okay.
And so I am so lucky in having Kyle Beckett because, firstly, I think he's such a fun illustrator. It's so vivid, his coloring and everything. It was more than what I hoped for. But then also, Kyle has a side story happening with the dog. So if you get the chance to look at Brave Miss Muffet, pay attention to the dog. I love
that last illustration with the dog.
Yes.
The very last one is so sweet. So fun.
It's such a lovely like juxtaposition and side story. And what I love so much about that, the librarian in me loves it because kids who can't read, their first experience with reading is through looking at illustrations. They're telling a story to themselves before they even know it. And so this idea that they have this story already in their head because of having Miss Muffet be so brave and the dog be so not brave is really awesome.
Yes. Okay. So what advice would you give someone who is thinking about writing a book?
My advice would be to make it fun. Make your writing process fun, because so much of how you get a kid engaged with stories is through playfulness. And it doesn't have to be completely insanely loud or wild, but even in the simple and gentle stories, there's some element of joy. And so I hope that writers have that and care for their reader. But then also, like, the more simple one is practice. Try and find workshops where you can hear your work being read aloud by someone else, where they can challenge things that you wouldn't think to challenge in yourself. Maybe, like, in my case, I did a graduate program. Make certain that you are in the world of children's literature. The more you read, the better your writing will be. And there are so many, thousands and thousands and thousands of wonderful picture books, and yet there's still room for more. So read them and then get to it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. So is there more in the future for Miss Muffet?
So Miss Muffet, her character ultimately is owned by Raycraft, so it would have to be them either requesting another Brave Miss Muffet book or me offering them one that they showed some interest in. I did like the idea of leaving it a little open-ended so that there was space for it.
So you can't really say at this point, but maybe. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So I'm going to move into some more fun get-to-know-you questions. So what books are you currently reading?
So right now I'm reading... Sorry, I have to turn pages. Right now, I am reading Bree Boyd is a Legend by Leah Johnson.
Okay, yeah.
I'm actually...
She's from Indy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so she's a local.
Yeah.
Local.
I'm actually reading the book to provide a book review for the Indiana Humanities Department.
Great.
So I'm really... But I also, I'm like, Leah Johnson, yes, please. So no problem. I will definitely do it. And I'm not very far in, but I love what she's already set up with Bree. Bree is for her perfectionist. She likes predictability and has a really high standard, and her parents have high standards, but Bree meets them easily. And then something happens. Bree gets hit by lightning, and then she develops the superpower of being able to move objects with her mind. So I'm just now at the turn of the story where, you have this is the ordinary life of Bree, and then, oh no. And then it just, who knows what's going to happen next, but I trust Leah Johnson, so
yeah,
I'm excited.
Okay. How do you draw inspiration?
I mostly stick with, when it comes to picture books, I draw inspiration from what I would have wanted or needed as a kid.
Yeah.
And then I throw in a dash of how would this be when read aloud? Because to me, picture books, one of the beautiful things about picture books is that they're almost always verbalized. Whether it's, in my case as a librarian, someone reading it for story time, or a little kid practicing and reading aloud to their parent or their sibling, or kids sitting in a caretaker's lap being read to. And so picture books earlier I said this phrase, they should taste good. They should have rhythm, and they should have some animation depending on the theme of the book. But I love it when a good book, like a picture book, is a good read aloud. And then when it comes to like YA, which is the other area that I write, which none of it's published, but I practice. For that one, it's definitely, I want to write characters that I didn't get to see growing up. Luckily, there's been a real broadening of voices in children's literature in general, but definitely in kids' writing. And so I'm now able to, as a high school librarian, I'm able to read these characters that I didn't get to have that were mirrors. But that's also part of it, is writing a book that gives the mirror to me.
Yeah. So if you could have dinner with 3 people, living or dead, who would you choose?
Mr. Rogers.
That is fantastic. I love that.
And for him, I was one of those kids that absolutely believed that he loved me just the way I was. And so he was like one of my favorite people.
Yeah.
And then I think Kate DiCamillo would be my second person.
Can I come to this dinner? I'm coming to this dinner.
I know, right?
I'm coming to this dinner.
She is...
Because of Winn-Dixie. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my personal favorite is The Tale of Despero, but both of those deserve Newberries. She is such a caring writer. Everything that she does, every place that she takes her reader, like the care that she takes in all of her craft choices to guide them through the story is just masterful. And in A Tale of Despero, like, you know, there's child abuse and neglect and deep abandonment and betrayal, and like when I list those things, it sounds awful. Like, what do you mean this book is for 7 to 9 year olds? But specifically, her choice to use a narrator, or sorry, that was weird pronunciation. A narrator is like this narrator who talks directly to the reader, and maybe that's a little of Brave Miss Muffet's Dear Reader, because that narrator will stop the action to directly talk to the reader about how things are going and where the light is, where can you find this light in the darkness, and hope. And she just,
Yeah, she can knock it out of the park, for sure.
best.
She's really good.
And then third, I'll try and keep this one fast, is my wife, because she's such a good conversationalist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So what's the number 1 travel destination on your bucket list, and have you been there?
No, I have not been there. I've been to the American Midwesterners version, maybe. But I really want to go to Mykonos in Greece.
Oh, yeah.
It's just every time I see pictures, they're always like
It's amazing.
vivid and gorgeous blues and fuchsias and whites. And it's just like so contrasted and gorgeous. And I can't imagine it not being like heaven.
I agree, yeah.
And then to make up for the fact that I have never left the United States, I go to Lake Michigan like probably 4 times a month all summer long. That's why I'm a teacher.
Oh, yeah, nice. So you get up there a lot. Do you go all the way up to the part where it's really blue? I don't know if that's Lake Michigan.
No, I
part of
don't.
it's
Usually
really
I'm going on a day trip, so I just end up in Michigan City.
Yeah, it's so easy. It's
Yeah.
close. And once we do it every summer with our kids, it's like, why aren't we doing this more
Yes.
often? We're too busy with our schedules. But it's like,
Yeah.
this is close and this is
Yeah.
great.
It's soul feeding for sure.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So last but not least, how can fans reach you, Dori?
So I'm actually terrible at promoting myself. So I would suppose I'm on Instagram as Dori the Human. That is to say, like, you know, instead of Dory the fish. And Dori is spelled D-O-R-I, though. And then I have a, like, email that I'm willing to be reached at, and it's dorifgraham@gmail.com. So DORIFGRAHAM @gmail.com.
Dori, thank you for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah, this has been refreshing. I knew I was going to love this conversation, and it's true. I did.
Yay.
Yeah. And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more Authors on Pages of Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices, a source for local authors and their stories. From the studios of Access Fort Wayne at the Allen County Public Library in downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm your host, Meg Bell. A special thank you to Kay Gregg for her work engineering and editing this episode. We've explored fascinating stories and insightful discussions today, but our journey doesn't end here. Find more episodes of Pages and Voices wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with the area's authors and their insights into the written word. Until next time, keep turning the pages, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.